Hello guys, welcome to another video, and in this video we are going to learn about use callback hook. Let us first of all create a project. Okay, so let me move to desktop and let me create a project called as use callback. Use callback, and let me run this command npm create npx create react app. Okay, so give it some moments and it will be done. Okay, so now my project is set up and I have opened my code editor. So before diving deep into the code and how it works, so let us first understand how what a use callback hook is, and why do we what is the need of it, and why we use callback, and we'll also see what is the difference between use callback and use memo. All right. So the key to understand use callback is basically first understanding what a referential equality is. Okay, so first we need to understand what is the problem that use callback is solving in the React world. Okay, so to understand it, we will have to understand what a referential equality is, and let me open my node terminal. Okay, so in JavaScript we have two type of data types. So I mean primitive one, and then we have the non-primitive one, right? Okay, so the primitive one are like numbers, boolean, and string. Okay, so a number like for example 2 is strictly equals to 2, right? So that gives me a true. And similarly I have yash equals yes, okay, it will give me true. And the reason it is giving me true is because they are primitive. So JavaScript or Node.js, whatever, so the values are being compared by their values. Okay, so we are comparing the value. So the value of 2 is 2, and the value of yash is yash, and that's why when I'm equating both of these, so LHS equals RHS, and that gives us a true. But the same thing is not is not true when we are using a non-primitive data type, which is an object, right? Or we can use an array. Okay, so it gives us false because they're not now they're not being compared by their values. They are being compared by their addresses or their memory addresses, and we can also say their references. Okay, so the references for these things are they're never going to be same. Okay, even though they have the same body. Okay, let's say now if I were to create a function eat, which simply returns a function which spits out eat, right? Okay, so now I will say like a okay, so lunch equals eat, lunch equals ff, and dinner equals ff. Okay, so if I use lunch, now if I compare lunch and dinner, this gives me false. And the reason why it gives me false, because you can see that dinner and lunch are both they are representing the same function, which is ff, but I'm getting false because they are like by reference wise they're very different. Even though they have same body, even though they have same definition, the representation, the name is same, the representation is same, definition is same, everything is same, but they represent a different memory location, right? Okay, so now imagine if the ff function was a very complex function, right? So the complex function which we can imagine is like calculating a Fibonacci series by using that recursive function, right? Recursive method. So it is like it is very complex, it is CPU intensive. Now if we just replace this function which is ff, and it's very simple function, right? So we will not see any any CPU throttling just because of this function being called so many times. But let's say like we have a function which is very CPU intensive, and in React what happens is that since whenever React re-renders a component, it recreates these functions, right? Because let's say this function was inside my functional component. So whenever a state changes, my React component re-renders, and when it re-renders, it is basically recomputing all these things, right? And let's say it is recomputing same things even though they are not, we don't want them, because the body is same, everything is same, so we don't want them to calculate it on the fly even though the parameters are same, because you can see this function ff will only return eat, I mean in every possible case. Okay, and that is the problem that we face in React, and the solution for that is using a use callback. So it's basically what a use callback is. Use callback is a kind of a memoized version of a function where we basically pass the function as the first parameter, and in the second parameter we basically give dependencies to tell React that hey, if one of those dependencies change, then only re-render or then only recompute the value of this function, otherwise just don't touch it, right? Okay, so now let's dive into the code and see how use callback works. Right, so let me open my app.js, app.js, and inside this what I'll do is, first of all, I will remove my remove everything inside this app class. Okay, and I'll even remove the app class because we don't need any CSS. Alright, so okay, so first of all, let me first import use state, and use effect probably will need from React, right? Okay, so hello world. Let me run this. Okay, so my app is running. Okay, so I need to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so to understand use callbacks, first of all, we'll see that why do we need use callback. So let me do one thing. I'm going to create one component called as list. Let us call as list.js, and let me just quickly create a component. Okay, and I'm going to call this inside my so list, right? Okay, so import list from okay, so now you can see that list is rendering. Okay, so now the thing is, let me first create a state called as number, and a setter function called as set number. Here use state, right? So the number, so by default will set my number to 1, and there's a reason why I'm setting it to 1, because otherwise it will give me a nan. Okay, so in case you don't know what a use state is, so I'll link somewhere in the description or an I button for the use state, also for the use effect video. Okay, so now what I'll do is I will create an input which will be of type number, and then it will have an on change which will input change input change handler, and let me quickly just create this. So what this function will do, basically it will set my number to whatever is whatever is in the event.targeted value. Okay, so it will accept any, and what this will do is this will set my number to e dot target dot value. Okay, and also this will take a prop called a value, which will make this input component as a okay, so it will make this input component as a control component, right? So number is 1, and input chain handler takes a e. Okay, so everything's nice. So now what I want to do is okay, I will create a function called as expo because of exponential, but then okay, so it will take no argument because it will directly take the value of number and it will return an array of number, then number into number, which is number square, and then let me copy this. Why I'm doing this? Because I need to make this function a little CPU intensive, because so that we can use the benefits of use callback. One more. 1 2 3 4 5. Okay, so expo is defined, but so we need to pass this function called as expo to this list. Okay, now I will I will just extract out my expo, and inside this I need my use effect to run, so I will import it, and inside this I will simply I'll make a state which is const, I'll call this items, set items use state. Okay, and it will be initially be an empty array, and what I'll do is I will simply items dot map, I'll call this as item, and I will also take index because I will give them, and now return. Okay, so inside this I will create a div, and inside div I will have a paragraph on item dot okay, yeah, item only item, and this div will have a key of index. That's why I took index from the params. Okay, now in the use effect, what I want to do is I want to call my expo function. Remember, it's a function, right? Because expo is a function, so I'm using expo function, and since this returns an array of number, what I'll do is I will simply use my setter function to set my items. Okay, and here I will pass the dependency as expo because we are using expo, so we need to, and now we will see that how many times this logs out, right? So rendering, okay, so it is saying a use effect is defined but never used. Okay, so you can see that the list is being printed out 2 times. Okay, and the reason why it prints out 2 times is because in my index.js I'm using this strict mode. If I remove this, it will only print out 1 time. Okay, so but I'm going to keep it there because it's good for development. It doesn't happen in the production. All right, so now if I increase the value, you can see in the console you can see that rendering list is being printed out, which is fine because I'm as I put one any number, then it renders the list, right? And that's that's explainable because you know my state is changing and my state is changing, so my list is changing, right? List is re-rendering itself. So and because and why it's re-rendering, because when I'm calling expo function is setting items, and setting items means an item which is a state is now updating, and when our state updates, then our component re-renders. Okay, so now the problem is like this is nice. Okay, this is exactly how React should work, and that's fine. But let's say I have a uh, I have a button, and the job for the button is to toggle input color. Okay, so so if I click on this button, then then the text inside this input element should change. Okay, and so we'll make a state for that as const color set color equals, and the by default we will keep the value as black. Okay, and we'll also what we'll do is we will attach an on click to this button because we want to toggle the input color when we click on it. Okay, so we'll call this okay, so on click, and we'll attach handle. Okay, hand toggle color. All right, so toggle color. So let me so let me define my toggle color, and it does not take any argument. So what this will do, this will simply check if my color, which is this one, is equals to black, then it will set color to green, right? Otherwise it will set color to black. Okay, or okay, yeah. And now what I want to do is inside my input component I need to style this, right? Oh sorry, I need to style this, and that's how we give a style. And I want to change my color based on the state, right? So color should be if color this is the state, if this is equals to black, then color should be black, otherwise it should be green. Okay, yes, that sounds good, right? So now by default it is black. What I want to do is, so first of all let me just enter a few values, just like 2 3 4, and you can see that this is rendering, like, right? So 3 for these 3 values, and the 2 for, because we're using the restrict mode. Okay, so now you can see that it's rendering. But the thing is, okay, so the toggle input color is nowhere. So this button toggle input color, or should I say that this function, which is toggle color handler, is nowhere related to this list component, right? Which is like, because this is taking expo function as a prop. So this function should not trigger any re-rendering in the child component, which is list component, right? So if I click on this, so there was a little bit of issue because I forgot to use else, right? So it was setting it to green, and then immediately it was setting it to black. Okay, so now if you'll see that okay, let me do one thing. I'm gonna change it to red. Okay, just because just to see it properly. Alright, so let me refresh it. Okay, so now if I enter values, you can see that it is rendering, and if I toggle input color, the first thing it should do is it should change the color to red. Okay, if I do it, you can see that the color has changed, but now you can see that this is rendering. Okay, so this is rendering, this is re-rendering the list component, which is that not natural. Okay, in React, which is natural, but it shouldn't happen. Okay, toggling color, right? So you can see that if I click on it, it also, it is toggling the color, which is, it is turning black into red and then red into black, but it is also re-rendering my list, right? And the problem with this is that it is creating my expo function again and again, because it is, it is checking for the referential equality, and it is not matching, and hence it is creating my expo function again and again, and that is the problem, right? And we need to fix it. And how we fix it? We will use callback for that, right? In order to fix the problem, which is re-rendering of the child component and creating this expo function again and again, which is we don't need because the parameter isn't changing, so we don't want that expo function to be created again and again. And the way to fix this is by using use callback, right? So we will what we'll do is we will simply wrap this with use callback hook, and what we'll do is, because otherwise it will ask to, okay, so we have to import it, right? And use callback takes the first argument as the function itself, and the second argument it takes is the dependency, right? So you can see that react.dependency list, and inside the dependency, what we want that when the number changes, I want my expo function to be rerun, okay, to execute. Okay, so now everything looks good. If I hit save, then we shouldn't see that problem, right? So you can see that it works, as it was working before. But now if I toggle my input color, which is, you can see that now it is only running this function, which is toggle color, and which is what we want. Okay, so now you can see that my child is not rendering itself. Okay, my list is not being rendered on the screen just because I'm changing some other parameter of the parent component. All right, so this seems fine. Okay, so now we will talk about like what is the difference between useMemo and useCallback. Okay, because those these two looks very similar and sound very similar, and the idea behind both of these is similar, which is memoization. So now let's talk about what is the difference between useMemo and useCallback. Okay, so the main difference between useMemo and useCallback is, see, the idea behind useMemo and useCallback is similar, which is which is what we call memoization, right? And memoization is the technique in data structures where we memorize the value and we store it in a table or in a list, so that we don't have to recompute the value. Okay, so so when it comes to use callback, now we have understood that use callback is basically trying to cache the function itself, right? So what we're doing is we are saying that if my number doesn't change, then use the previous expo function. Okay, but when it comes to useMemo, in useMemo we do not memorize the function itself. We basically memorize the value that gets returned, that value that gets returned by the function. Okay, so the difference is that in use callback we are basically caching or memoizing the function itself, and on the other hand, in useMemo we basically memorize just the value that is that you will return from the function. Okay. Oh, I think so see, this was the lecture, this was a tutorial about use callback, and in the next video I will talk about useMemo, and yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. So what we'll do is in the next 2 or 3 days I will release a video for useMemo, and thank you so much for for if you came this far, then thank you so much, I really appreciate it. And if you haven't checked out my other videos, which is I've made 2 of them till now, which is use state and use effect, then please do check it out.